Hey folks, it's showtime. Welcome to Practical Deer Processing. We have Judy and Guy Gardner here of New Hill Education and Mentoring Program. Tonight, we've been doing this for a number of years, and obviously they're involved with the hunting webinar as well. We have Master Officer Eric Gleason with us tonight, so no virtual regulations law breaking. And obviously, I'm Deke James, the Hunter Engagement Coordinator. We hope you enjoy the webinar tonight. And before we get started, we have some information to cover and a few commercials, and we'll dig right into it. So obviously, is the overview. The webinar length, as you can see, is 1 hour. It is recorded and distributed in less than 2 weeks. It may be a week, but that has to be processed. Then after that 1 hour, there's a question and answer session, 30 minutes long. We ask you to write questions. So in writing, not via voice. They must be topic specific, and they will be addressed at the Q&A at the end. Chat hand raising will be monitored, but we want you to allow us to cover the materials before writing questions or before asking anything in the chat in hand as well, because we want to be able to narrate and have everybody else be able to hear them. As I always say, that website is basically where you can find out everything you need to know. Sometimes you got to search around a little bit, but also the Regs Digest. And as I often say to folks, take it to the restroom with you because you got to go there anyway. Always let your fingers do the walking first before you go out. So thanks for joining us tonight. Obviously, there is a justification for what we do as a state agency that is tasked with using wildlife science-based principles. We use empirical evidence to move forward in everything, including programming. And the reason I have a position here, and many states have a hunter engagement coordinator, is because of precipitous decline in hunting participation since 1975, 1980. And our lowest point so far is by this 2016 report. This is a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Survey done every 5 years, and we are waiting for the 2021. So I think they're a bit behind. But again, our numbers continue to go down. Taking a look at North Carolina, license holders have been on an upward trend, but the participation or actual active hunters is about half of that. And as you can see there, for the 2021 year, about 300,000 as compared to close to 700,000 license holders. So having license purchases is great, but participation is also great as well. This graph represents the, as I like to call them, the greatest number of modern day North American hunters of all time, the baby boomer generation. They represent the largest number, and they are slowly, and I'm included, we are fading out. As you can see at about age 63 or so, which is the window I'm headed at, that's when we start dropping. And this is a huge cohort of people that will likely not be replaced. And so that's something that states are looking at now. If you look at the entire population of North Carolina, that, as you can see, those green lines continues to grow. And anybody in North Carolina, especially living near metros, they know that. You look at that number, and then you look down at the bottom, and you see the license holders as compared to active license participants, very low number and very small compared to the population. So I decided to do some math in 2021. And as I already mentioned, 300,000 hunters, and roughly at that time, 10.6 million people. We represent 2.9% of the population overall. In 1975, 1980, it was between 8 and 10% of the population. And even at that low in 2016, probably 4 to 5% of the population. So point, obviously, conservation is largely funded by hunters and anglers, but also we want to remain relevant. And if you get so small, it's like, hey, in a large democratic society, does hunting really matter? And for those of us that enjoy being out, we want it to matter. Obviously, I'm involved in these two things, webinars that are for all skill levels, and the Getting Started Outdoors workshop on the other side there that is for the very new and those that don't have the social support. So all the basics that most hunters know, how to shoot, how to use maybe tree stands, how to scout, how to recover game. We cover that stuff in webinars, and that's why they're all experience levels. Most hunters already know that. But for this GSO, a lot of those folks don't know that, and that's why that's a very basic course. So basically they're experiments to offset participation decline, and only time will tell how we're doing. Our primary limiting factors, as you can see, is volunteer support. We can always use more GSO instructors and/or post-GSO hunt mentors. Not all GSOs have a hunt afterwards. It is very much a limiting factor to have assistance, and I rely largely on volunteers. Also applicable venues that have GSO-related amenities, and that is the outdoor workshops. So if you're like an active engaged hunter, or even if you're a new hunter and you want to be involved with the GSO program, you don't have to be a really experienced hunter, because there's logistics opportunities as well that run a workshop. Reach out at that GSO at ncwildlife.org, because we can always use you. This is on the scene right now. It's very important to cover. This is from our current deer biologist, Mariah Bogus. And so I cover these at all of the events, and I'll move through it relatively quickly, but do know that we want you to review this. Again, as I said, let your fingers do the walking first, and make sure you cover it, because it's very important. We want to get a hold on this. Obviously, it is called chronic wasting disease, CWD. As you can see there, it is neurological, spread by the saliva, urine, feces. Infected deer can remain sick for a few years, so they can look normal initially before they actually end up dying, and it is always fatal. It does become more common in the herd over time, and could be 30, 40 years till we'd see population declines, but we will. So containing this, preventing it from spreading, is critical. And this is one of those things where it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. And even in my home state, states are learning to live in it. In Pennsylvania, it's been around a long time, and it originally started out west in 1967. It first became noticed on public land around 1981. And again, it's just popping up. And so we're going to learn to live with it. Takes, again, 16 to 24 months before a deer shows the symptoms, and those are all the things that happen, and you can read those. I don't need to read it for you, but it basically wastes away. And again, unlike hemorrhagic or blue tongue, it is always fatal. First detected up in that corner there, where you can see where it says Blue Ridge Parkway up in Yadkin County. Confirmed now in those number of counties: Cumberland, Stokes, Surrey, Wilkes, Yadkin, and you can see it's color coded. So there's two different areas there. The center core is considered the primary surveillance area, and the outside is the secondary. So that is the locations right now that are seriously getting checked. And obviously you can send your deer, you can take your deer and at drop-off locations, the head typically, and get it tested. And we're encouraging people to do that. And it becomes mandatory in these areas. So this does apply to the special surveillance. There is a wildlife feeding ban. The baiting is legal during the hunting season, and that's obviously to bring the number of deer, bring the numbers down in those areas, but it is prohibited between January 2nd and August 31st in those surveillance areas. And as we know, the last thing we want to do is congregate deer. So baiting, is one of those things right now that is looking at very much scrutinized. Fawn rehabilitation prohibited. Do not transport the carcass in surveillance areas. It needs to stay in those locations. And in fact, it's always good not to give deer a ride. Keep them in the area where they were harvested. Mandatory CWD testing during the 2 weeks of gun in these areas. And obviously the urine glands or excretion may not be collected off harvested for hunting or scouting purposes. So don't be using that in these areas. And you want to see the page 55 Regs Digest for more regarding baiting and attractants, because now things like synthetics are recommended, and/or in these companies that actually do test their animals. So we want to avoid that random urine and attractants out there. So we need you to help us fight it. Follow these regulations, and again, read that information at ncwildlife.org CWD. You will be, when I send out the recordings, which again will be less than 2 weeks for all those registrants, you will get links to this stuff. Please do read it, just like you want to review the regulations digest before you go hunting. And responsibly dispose of the carcasses, and don't move it out of surveillance areas. This is where my colleague and fantastic partner that we have, New Hill, and just, a few briefs with them. Guy and Judy Gardner are like a mom and pop. That's what I call them. They have a handful of mentors. They have their own series of videos. They have their own field days. They have set the bar high when it comes to volunteering. And so they will be sharing with you here a few slides briefly, and you will also receive them when I send out the recordings. Guy, take it away. Or Judy.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. This is Judy. Yeah. So with regard to participation, our passion along with Dietz is to try to figure out how it is that we can engage and retain new hunters in the field. And, we understand that particularly for folks who are new to hunting, that don't have social support, and even others that have grown up in a hunting family, there's a lot to learn. There's two things, though, we know to be true. One is that as long as you hunt, you will be learning something new. And the other is that if you can get some help from an experienced hunter, you can dramatically reduce that learning curve. And so Dietz reached out to New Hill and Opportunity Outdoors, and the three groups have been working together for several years now to offer a multi-stage skills-based training program. As Dietz mentioned, the Resources Commission is offering broad-based skills and knowledge through webinars and through these field days called GSOs. We encourage then folks who have participated and gotten a little bit of experience under their belt to take on some more advanced training, and New Hill offers that in putting this knowledge into practice. We've got some things that I'll show you in the next couple of slides, and then Opportunity Outdoors takes it a step further in providing some outdoor group-based mentored opportunities. We all together work to try to help to improve networking opportunities for you as well with other experienced hunters. Okay.
And again, you might have to click on the screen there.
Okay. So very quickly, the New Hill has got a 14-part webinar series. You're going to get these slides afterwards. Just know that these are topics that are specific to hunting. It goes more in depth on each one of these. They're available on YouTube for you to view at your leisure. We offer a field day series that puts that learning into practice. Our field days are held near Raleigh, and it's a series of 5 seminars that are field days that are full day, and then we take you hunting toward the end of the season. Together, Opportunity Outdoors and New Hill are working on a series called Hands-on Deer Processing this year. 2 events have been scheduled already. Opportunity Outdoors is working on adding to that list. This is a web page where you'll be able to link to each one of those opportunities and register. And this is Opportunity's webpage. You can sign up to receive notices and receive their newsletters. North Carolina Hunters for the Hungry is an organization that's been involved for about 30 years now. Should you have the opportunity to harvest deer, fill your freezer, and want to give back to the community, this is a great organization. It is 100% pass-through of costs go to processors, and we're able to they feed many people every year through hunter support.
All right, thank you, Judy. Like Dietz said, I'm Guy Gardner, and I'm part of New Hill Hunter Education and Mentoring Program. And Judy and I have been processing our own deer for a number of years. And this whole processing side kind of got started because we were working with Dietz doing an introduction to deer hunting. And we got questions, says, well, okay, I finally learned how to hunt. I kill a deer. What do I do with it? So that got us thinking about, well, maybe we need to do something. So Judy and I started our processing, and this was back in the day, there were not videos, no YouTube. That's so long ago. So we started with books, and we're not professional processors. This is the way we do it at home. Every deer we get. My goal here is the minute that deer's on the ground from my shot or Judy's shot, we know what happened to that meat till it's on our plate. So, we have control of it, and that's very important to me to know exactly what's been going on with that. So that's why we started doing it ourselves. And you can see that it's just like doing livestock. It's just generally a little bit smaller than, say, a cow, but you kind of do it the way you want to do it. And this is key, is that you'll develop your system, the system that works for you. Doesn't have to be the way we do it. Doesn't have to be the way, if you watch some of those YouTube videos, it'll be the way you like it. Do you like a lot of steaks? Do you like a lot of roast? Do you do a lot of ground meat? So you develop your own system that works. So this is why we like venison. They call it almost a perfect red meat. And as you can see by these graphics, that there is less fat, fewer calories, more protein, slightly more iron. There is a little bit higher cholesterol, but cholesterol, you do need cholesterol. But probably the number one thing that people like about this is there is no added hormones, steroids, or antibiotics that you might get with livestock animals. And there's kind of a push now to look for all natural, local food sources, and deer meets those criteria. So often you'll hear from maybe experienced people, if you're not, well, I don't like venison, it's gamey. Well, deer is a game animal. So, but in this, the way they normally say gamey, it's something negative. But you got to realize this is not chicken, it's not pork, and it's not beef. It's going to taste different. It's a different animal. So, don't expect it to be something that you're used to necessarily if you've never eaten it. But there are things you can do to help improve it. And most of the poor taste that comes with venison has to do with the way this meat is handled, generally in the field. But so these are a few things you want to make sure you do. So number one, cool down quickly, because bacterial growth requires moisture and heat. So the longer you take to field dress, and by cooling quickly, field dressing is one of the main things you can do. And field dressing, if you're not familiar with it, is removing the viscera, gutting, different terms for it. So once you do that, you're removing a lot of the body heat, and a lot of the excess blood drains out of the tissues as well. So field dressing as quick as you can, that helps cool it down. And while you're doing the processing part, you want to discard the bloodshot meat. That's areas where the bullet or the arrow hit the deer. It caused a lot of blood loss. A lot of blood gets into the muscle. Bone fragments can be in there, things like that. So you want to remove all that. That's something you wouldn't want to eat. And so you want to get that out as you're going through your processing. Generally, it's done when you're skinning. You want to remove fat. I've heard controversy on this. Some people actually use the fat. Deer fat is more like a tallow. It's kind of a waxy nature, so it's not something that's quite as flavorful. But everybody does things slightly different. So you generally want to remove the fat. And the silver skin, you'll see later on. Silver skin is a tissue that kind of holds the muscles together. It's very tough, and so that's something you're going to want to remove. We bone out, try to avoid using a bone saw as much as possible. The marrow can be infused into the muscle if you're cutting with the bone saw through the muscle, and plus the fragments of bone from the saw can actually get in there, little chunks of bone in there. So try to avoid using the saw as much as possible. And the recommendation is to freeze the meat before you eat it. I know some people will go to a hunt camp or something, they want camp meat, and so they'll kill a deer and then eat it. Yeah, it's okay, but there could be some potential parasites that are killed by freezing. It's also, and we'll talk about this, especially when you're talking about jerky and you want to cut nice, thin, even strips, it's nice to have it frozen, and then before you cut it, let it thaw some so you can slice through it evenly, but it helps it's more firm and you can get nice clean slices that way. Always keep your surfaces clean. You can use a light bleach solution to disinfect your surfaces. And then for CDC recommends for, especially for chronic wasting disease, CWD, a 50-50 bleach solution to clean your utensils when you're done. So I just threw this in there just because this is something that we did a deer donation site at our house, and we were doing anywhere from 80 to 130 deer a year. And these went through Hunters for the Hungry that Judy mentioned, and they went to the food pantries. But we would see deer mainly with the fibromas come in, and people say, "Oh, I'm not eating that deer. I don't know what it is. It's terrible. It's not going to be any good." So they would donate them. You know, they wanted other people to get them. They just didn't want to eat them. But what it is a fibroma is a tumor, but it's a benign, and it's a virus, kind of like warts. And these deer can be exposed to this. And generally, come winter time, it goes away. It starts fading away. Doesn't really cause any problem unless it gets so severe that it gets around their mouth and things and they can't feed. And if you have a deer that has a few of these, but if they are infectious, if they got pus or something like that, any animal that looks sick or has problems like that, you probably do not want to consume. So these can cause some problems if they rupture and start having an infection, and you don't want to eat them then. The other one is mange. You see a few of these once in a while, and this is caused by a mite. Again, both of these, all those come off of the skin, and the meat is fine. You do want to take safety precautions. This is just general good food handling process. You know, like I said, any animal that looks sick, underweight, don't eat it. And you can report it to the wildlife helpline. They may want to try to get a sample of it, make sure, find out what's wrong with it. It's up to you if you want to harvest that. We can talk to Eric about whether they have to use a tag. I'm not an enforcement officer, but that could be a question if you shoot it to put it out of its misery. So anyway, you know, if it's underweight, anything that looks like a problem, don't consume it. We wear latex gloves when we're field dressing and when we're doing our processing and our butchering. So we like to wear rubber gloves or latex gloves or nitrile, whatever you need. We also wear these cut resistant gloves. This is one right here. You can buy those online, not very expensive, and they won't, you can cut yourself if you try hard enough, but what they do, it keeps nicks from happening. They've just got wire mesh in there. But they will help slow down or stop the little nicks that you might get from your knife. You do want to try to get rid of, you know, you don't want to eat the brain, spinal cord, spleen, tonsils, lymph nodes. This is where some of the diseases tend to concentrate. So you just want to avoid that. Most of those you don't eat anyway, but the lymph nodes are scattered throughout the body. And you won't get rid of necessarily every single one of them, but there are the fat tissues and in spaces in between the muscle is where these are located. They're not actually in the muscle tissue, so you can remove a majority of them. And just like I said, safe food handling, wash your hands and instrument often, and you know, disinfect them, and cook to the recommended temperatures, which is generally about 160. A lot of people don't, you know, we talk about cooking. I'm not a chef by any means, but you know, it's hard to cook. It's easy to cook venison too much and have it tough. So fine line in between there. But any meat that's manipulated a lot, like ground meat, sausage, and jerky, you definitely want to cook those to appropriate temperatures. Okay, so field dressing. Highly recommend you do this as soon as you can. It does, like I said, removes a lot of the body heat, gets that carcass to cool down. It's less weight to carry out. I think you lose about 40% of the body weight when you remove the guts and the heart and lungs. So it's very, very important. And it cools faster, and which, you know, helps reduce the chances of spreading the disease by leaving the entrails out there where the deer was. If it does have a disease, the disease stays there. You can do, if you don't have a rack or some way to hang it, you can do it on the ground. This is what we're going to show with the video, and we got some other information here real soon on how to do it when it's laying on the ground. So this is kind of a common way to do it, because you shoot a deer, first thing you want to do is get the guts out of it, so you don't have time to take it someplace to hang it. So you just do it on the ground. But make sure you know that some landowners don't want those left out there. It does feed things like coyotes, and some people don't want the coyotes to be fed. So you have to talk to the landowner and get permission and before you do any of that. So if you can't debone it, make sure you field dress it. It says bury. It's very hard to bury that out there in the woods deep enough where they won't dig it up anyway. But if you have to take it home, you can double bag it, dispose of it in the landfill. And if some hunt clubs will have a pit that they bury it in, and that way it's actually staying there on the property. And so it's important to not to transport this, like Dee said, don't give it a ride. Okay, this is a video on field dressing. This is one that we did at one of the GSOs that Dee ran, and so we're going to show you how to field dress.
My name is Sophia.
And I'm Evan, and we're here with the Opportunity Outdoors and New Hill Hunter Education Mentor Program.
So the first thing you want to do when you approach your deer is make sure it's expired, and before you even touch it is you want to tag the month and the day of your hunt. And then once you do that, you'll be ready to call it in later. But for now, we'll process the deer and get it gutted. So there's two ways really to start this. You can start at the sternum, you'll feel the rib cage, and then you'll feel gut where it'll give in. Or you can start at the anus and then cut up to the sternum, but I prefer to start at the sternum. So you'll take your knife, and I'll give myself a little bit of room, and I'll make an incision. And here I don't have to worry about getting into any guts. I hit bone. You'll find that incision that you just made, and you'll get your gut hook or knife or whatever you're using, and you get it in there and you put an upwards motion so you don't get any of the guts. And then slowly, and once you get to the genital area, whether you have a buck or a doe, you just kind of want to go around it. So you'll notice I just got through skin, so I'm going to go again and being even more careful, again with an upwards motion, and you'll get through that membrane. So you'll notice I just got through skin, so I'm going to go again and being even more careful, again with an upwards motion, and you'll get through that membrane. There you go. You want to make that incision as wide as you possibly can so you can have room.
If you don't have somebody helping you, like I am helping the deer right now, it might be helpful to put the deer next to a tree and tie one of its legs over, so that way you can keep it open like this and work.
And then you can, if you wanted to start at the anus, you could do this first. So basically what you want to do, you just want to cut around the anus and free it up so we can pull it out later. You can kind of see that it's freeing up. So just make sure there's not moving anything. That should be good for now. Now, roll up your sleeves. And just kind of slowly start tugging away. And you'll start to see where things are connected. So this is your main gut. You don't want to puncture that. And then just free up your diaphragm. Cut that away. It's keeping everything in there. Free up everything from the sides without cutting yourself. And then for this, you kind of have to reach in and feel. So you're feeling for that, for the lungs and the esophagus, and you're just going to reach in and carefully sever that. And pull as you're doing it. And then you just pull the ends out that we cut. Good. And there we go. Those are your guts. And now, so the heart was shot and the lungs. So you're not going to keep those. But you can keep your liver. And the other lobe of the liver. And then just kind of you can get that blood out. There you have it. Field dressed deer.
All right, pretty graphic, but that's what you're going to be dealing with if you haven't ever field dressed before. It doesn't take very long. You saw how quickly that was. All those guts, the stomach and intestines will be gone overnight. You know, between raccoons and coyotes and foxes and everything else out there that they will eat it very quickly. So we're kind of just going to review what went on there. Like I said, you want to field dress as soon as you can. It removes the body heat and the excess blood. You saw how much blood came out of that. That's blood that is no longer in the muscle tissue. And it does aid, like I said, about 40% of the body weight is gone now. So it makes it easier to carry out. A sharp knife helps. You just got to be careful, especially when you're doing the heart and lung area in there. You're reaching in there. You want to make sure, one thing, you don't cut your fingers with your own knife, but you got to make sure, especially if it's an archery kill, you got to make sure there's no broadhead still in there. You got to account for your broadhead before you do that, wherever that you might have hit it. Even a firearm, you know, the ribs can be sharp. You want to be very, very careful when you're reaching in there. So just take it slow. There's never a hurry. I hate these videos that talk about how fast they can do something. You don't need to be quick. You just need to get it done and be safe. Very important. You know, Deet's talked about how the hunting numbers are not increasing, and so there's significantly more non-hunters. So we want to transport our animals responsibly. Not everybody wants to see a dead deer, especially with blood and everything on your bumper and stuff like that. So make sure you think of others. We don't want to convert a non-hunter into an anti-hunter. So there's many ways you can do this. You can hang it. I mean, it's much cleaner by being able to hang it. All that stuff drips and drains down. You can do it by the hind legs, which is probably what most people do. I actually like the neck because you don't have the chest cavity holding in the blood. You know, it all drains down a little bit easier. But again, it's just like I said, it becomes a system that you like, the one that fits your needs. So there's all kinds of hanging things. You can get, different hoists. You can get pulleys that you can put over a branch. You can get them hooked to your truck or your receiver hitch. So there's all kinds of ways to do that. just to kind of review again, you want to cut around the anus like she did, because you want to pull the intestines out of the hip area, the pelvic area. You want all the large intestines to come out. You want everything out. So that's why you have to cut around there. There's a lot of attachments in there. So a little bit longer knife is kind of helpful because you can reach way back in there and cut the attachments that are holding that in. And then, like she said, you cut from up to the breastbone. Keep your knife pointed upward, your blade pointed upward. We'll talk about that when you're skin, because that cuts less hair follicles, so it gets less hair on your meat. And it's kind of hard to get that hair off of meat once it's on there. So you'll just, like she said, you saw the whole thing. Those organs are held in there. You just have to kind of pull, see where the attachment is, and lightly cut into them and into the attachments to remove it. Like she said, you definitely want to avoid cutting the stomach and the intestines. Usually if you cut that stomach, next time you'll be more careful, because that is full of gas and it does come out, and then it gets messy. And so you don't want to get that onto your deer if you can avoid it at all. And then you reach up there, cut that trachea and esophagus, being very careful not to cut your hands, fingers. So a short bladed knife for that, or I like to hold near the, right at the base of the blade, so I can reach in there. I feel like I got good control. And then you'll reach over and drain the blood out. Aging is not mandatory. You'll hear this a lot. I mean, people pay a lot of extra money for aged beef, so there is a benefit to it, but it's not absolutely necessary. A lot of people never do this, and the meat is absolutely fine. But there are natural enzymes within the muscle tissue that kind of breaks down some of the fibers and makes it a little bit more tender, a little bit more flavorful. So if you want to do this, it's very important because, like I said, heat and moisture promotes bacterial growth. So you've got to be able to maintain this temperature somewhere around between 34 and 38 degrees in order to reduce the possibility of bacterial growth. You don't want to freeze it because the aging process doesn't occur if the meat's frozen. So if you got a way to hang it, like there are walk-in coolers, different things you can do. I always recommend don't skin it. I did that one time with this, took the skin off, and then there's this crust on the outside that I had to remove, and I didn't like doing that. So leave the skin on. We'll talk about tenderloins in a little while. They are the one muscle tissue that you'll take out that's inside the abdominal cavity, and it doesn't have skin over it. So if you're going to age it for several days, they tend to dry out. So you either want to remove those when you skin them and go ahead and process them and freeze them, or you want to at least cover them with some plastic wrap or something to keep them from drying out. You can also do this in ice chest. It's the way I've always done it. You get an ice chest big enough to hold the deer that you've got, and you'll skin and quarter it. We'll talk about quartering in a minute. And you put it in the cooler on ice. You got to make sure there's ice on it the whole time it's in there. You got to check it regularly. You want to tilt the cooler up so that the drain hole is open and downhill. So as the ice melts, the melt water goes out of the cooler. You don't want that meat to be in standing water. However, some people do actually soak it in water. So again, there's different ways to do everything. If you've got a refrigerator, you can do it in the refrigerator. That way it stays nice and dry. Obviously, safe food handling. You don't want to have blood dripping down onto some food that you're going to eat, especially if it's something just not going to cook. But usually if it's a refrigerator, it's a dedicated refrigerator. Aging, again, you don't have to, but aging 4 to 10 days is kind of the normal. 10 days, if it's an older, say an older buck or an older doe, you might want to age it a little bit longer, because it'd be a little bit tougher as they age. So anyway, it just depends on the way you like it. You'll learn over time what is a good length of time for you. Okay, so you've got it field dressed, and if you're going to age it or not, the next thing you got to do is skin it. So a fresh deer, so if you're not having aged it, a fresh deer is actually easier to skin. One, you field dressed it, and then you got, now it's still kind of warm, but that skin comes off quite a bit easier when the animal is real fresh. And like I mentioned, as you're skinning this, we'll talk a little bit more. You'll want to remove anything that's hemorrhaged. A lot of blood, looks like a big blood area in there. That's probably where the bullet or the arrow hit. Try to go ahead and remove that. Like I said, keep your knife blade pointing up when you're cutting through the skin, and that will help reduce, it doesn't stop totally, but it helps reduce the hair from getting on the meat. We've used this, I read this someplace, a little, one of those copper scouring pads actually does help to get some of that hair off the meat. I've also seen where people take a propane torch and they burn it. So there's different ways to do different things. So be very slow, take your time, sharpen your knife often, because this skin is pretty tough and it will dull. If you're going to save the hide, you may want to be a little bit careful. A razor sharp knife, will cut the skin pretty easily if you're trying to keep it all intact. But basically what you're doing, you're going to cut around all the way around the hind legs if you're hanging it from the hind legs, or all the way around the neck if you're using it from the head. And you're just going to peel it down and use your knife to cut the tissue that's holding the skin onto the muscle. And you'll see it, it's kind of a white, and you'll just cut with your knife, and it'll cut that tissue, and the skin will come off. And when it's up by the hind legs and down the back, you can actually pull quite a bit of that off. Once it gets up into the chest and neck, it gets a little bit tighter. I did put this picture down here at the very bottom, if you can see that. There is a way you can go onto YouTube and they'll show you different ways where you can actually use an ATV or something even a truck to pull the skin off. And there's some way, you got to do some preparation for that. But when we did our deer donation site, the first 2 years I had to skin them, and I actually did that with an electric hoist, and it does work. It saved me a lot of effort. So it's another way you might want to try. So you can do it from, like I said, the head or the hind legs. It just depends on which way you prefer. So you're going to want to cut around the head or the legs, like I said, and then you're just going to pull it down and, cut the tissue that's holding the skin to the muscle. Just take some time. You don't want to be in a hurry. And like I said, as you get towards the shoulder, it gets a little bit tighter. You can save the hide. A lot of people do this and they end up getting them tanned. But we were doing this the first couple of years. We got some salt. I got it, not marketing anything, but Tractor Supply had this real fine salt that they use, I think, for cattle. And that worked very well. Once I got it cleaned, I was able to salt it down, and we were saving hides for the Elk Foundations, had a hand for military wheelchair gloves. So it was a very worthy cause to save these. There's a way people are starting to do this a little bit more often, is if you can get a deer to where you're going to take care of it very quickly, where skinning is, where gutting is not, it's not necessary to gut it right away, then this is a way you can do it, where you actually cut down the backbone or on the side of this, you cut the skin, and then you peel the skin off, just like you would going to skin it, but you haven't gutted it yet. And then while it's hanging, you actually take the meat off the bones totally, which you'll see how we do this in a few minutes. And so you end up with the skeletal system and the intestines and stomach inside, and you dispose of the entire carcass. So one way some people do it, but you have to have the facilities and to do it this way. If you're going to have it mounted, I would just recommend, I'm not going to talk about this, I'm not a taxidermist, I would find a taxidermist before you start skinning and ask them what to do, or go onto YouTube and find out, because if you cut up into too far into the chest, it's going to cost you more because they have to fix it. All right, so now we're going to start pulling meat off this. You got it all skinned and you're ready to go. So the order you do this is not necessarily significantly important. If you're hanging it from the hind legs, obviously you can't take the hind legs off because that's where it's being held by. So you can, first, what we generally do is take off out the back straps, and there's two of those, and they run on the outside, up on both sides of the vertebrae. This is the spinal column right down here. And so they're on both sides. So up in here, this is the hip bone. You can feel it. It's kind of a bone that sticks out a little bit. You feel that, and you make your cut there. Then you run your knife all the way down the backbone. And then it's a matter of just peeling this off, because these are the ribs, the short ribs and the regular ribs, and they are curved because the chest curves around to the front. So you have to just follow the ribs with your knife. So this way, a little bit longer knife, like a boning knife, helps. You can put it down in there and you just slice along the bone, and this thing kind of peels on down. It's a nice long, here's an example, here's a nice long piece of meat. Excellent. This is one of the better parts of meat. It doesn't have a lot of tendon, or it doesn't have tendon or anything in it, so it's very tender. It does have this is the silver skin I mentioned. This is on the outside, so you're going to want to fillet that off. You can do it out there in the field when you're doing it, or outside when you're quartering this, or you can do this in the house if you do it. You're butchering in the house. You know, it doesn't matter. Do it either time. So now you can do the front legs. This is the shoulder. You'll hear the shoulder. There is no bone-to-bone connection. There's no joint there. So basically, all you do is it's nice to have somebody else hold the other side, or you tie it, because when you pull that away, it's going to want to spin the carcass. But you just pull the front leg away from the carcass, and you take your knife and you follow the bones, the ribs, and just start cutting it off, and that front leg will come right off. I do recommend these meat hooks. You can jam that into the muscle, especially up in this area, because when that is freed, when it cuts down, if you're just holding it like that and your hands are wet, very easy for this to slip out of your hands. It goes down on the ground. Then you got to get all that leaf matter off and stuff. So you don't want to do this. This gives you a good handle. Same with the hind legs. This is a little bit tricky. Takes some time. Again, we try to do this without using a saw. Some people use a saw. I'm not saying you can't, but we try to do it without. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut down along the hip bone until you find the ball and socket joint right here. So the ball is on the leg bone and the socket is in the hip. So once you find that, you're going to try to cut all the way around that as best you can, because right in between the ball and the socket is a tendon, and it's really tough, and you're going to have to get your knife tip and kind of cut that before you can really free this. And so once you've cut that, you're going to just get your knife and follow the hip bone all the way down until it's free. And again, use this meat hook, because this is even heavier than the front leg, and this thing can slip out of your hands very, very easily. So, get that meat hook in there just before the final cut, when it's free from the carcass. Then one of the other things you'll want to get, and this is the tenderloins that I mentioned. If you're going to age this thing, you'll want to do something with it. Now you can see these are real dark. More than likely, these got dried out a little bit. So they probably didn't cover these, or obviously didn't take them off. So these are on the inside of the cavity. So this is the spinal column right there. So they're right on both sides on the inside. A lot of people forget these and don't get them, but these are actually probably the most tender. They're just very small. My recommendation, like down here, says if it's a gut shot deer, if you ruptured the intestines with your bow or your arrow or your bullet, might want to not keep those things, because they're going to be exposed to all that stomach content. And then after you get those out, you're going to want to peel as much meat off this carcass as you can. That includes between the ribs. Now, some people do save the ribs as a slab. The problem is there's not a lot of meat on there, and that does dry out and gets tough fairly easily if you try to cook it whole. But you want to make sure you take as much meat off this carcass as you can. You owe it to this deer. You shot it. Save absolutely as much meat as you can. And all that little scraps of meat will go into the grinding, some of it can even be made into jerky. Hopefully, if you're back far enough, you can go ahead and quarter this thing out in the field. It's very common out west where you have elk and moose, where you're a little bit hard to carry out a 800 pound or 1,000 pound animal. So they quarter it and pack it in game bags and then bring it out on their backpack. So this is another thing. You can go online, look how to do this. We're not going to get into this too much. This picture, even though we got this on there, I don't recommend this. This is, he doesn't have blaze orange on. I wouldn't be carrying a deer out of my back without a lot of blaze orange on, but generally you want to probably drag this or have a deer cart or some way to get it out. All right, so now you've got it quartered and it's either in a cooler or it's some way ready, and you're going to go now and you're going to actually butcher this. So the butchering is basically just removing major muscles, and these are pretty distinct. And then you're going to bone out everything else that comes off, and that can be used as burger. So what do you need? You don't need a lot of tools. You need gloves. I recommend gloves. Again, like I said, these are the cut resistant gloves, but then I also recommend rubber gloves, latex, nitrile, whichever you want. Some kind of a knife. This is a boning knife. It's got a little curve to it, kind of thin blade, fairly flexible. Any knife will work. I had an old hickory knife I used for years and years, and it works fine. So it doesn't have to be any special knife. Do have a hacksaw. The only thing I cut with a hacksaw, I cut the hooves off and I cut the head off, and that's all. I don't use a saw after that. You want to
Guy,
keep it.
if you don't mind me just throwing this in there, my favorite knife to use processing a deer is about a $6 fillet knife from Walmart. That really thin blade works really well. You don't need to buy anything real expensive. You can use very, very cheap knives.
Exactly. What you got at the house is usually if you got a set of knives, you've got one in there that'll work. You want to keep it sharp, so a sharpening stone. I use a steel regularly to keep the edge there. You don't use a steel to sharpen a knife. You use it to keep the edge. You keep it sharp. You need some kind of a good surface to use. A good big cutting board is nice. Something to preserve it in. Freezer paper. They've used that for decades. It works fine with some tape. Or you can use the vacuum sealers. That's what we use now. Something to mark and label your packaging. And if you're going to do grinding, you have to do some kind of a grinder, whether it's a hand grinder or one of the big meat electric grinders. These are always nice to have. These work. Judy and I used a hand grinder for years and years, and it worked fine. And then if you're going to use cube steaks, which we don't do, you have a cuber tenderizer, and then some kind of sausage stuffer, which we'll talk a little bit about. So the benefit of boning out versus keeping it and freezing it is it's less volume, so it reduces some of the volume for you. It also when you cut that bone, gets a sharp edge. It can cut the paper or the plastic if you're using vacuum sealer. So try to do this by boning out. I think you'll like it much better. So we're going to start by boning out the front leg, the shoulder. Very, very simple to do. This is the shoulder blade. So there's going to be this bony ridge coming right down here. You can see it with the meat gone. You're just going to flay these two chunks of meat off. We always grind them, but you can do what you want to with those. And then this is the arm, and you just make a cut down there, and then you take your knife and you work it around the bone. Here's the bone right here. And you can take this off into one chunk if you want. And then you've got the shanks. The shanks have a lot of tendon and sinew in them. Some people like them. We use them for ground meat. This is the hind leg, and this is where a big bulk of your meat's going to come from. Like I've said, there are muscle groups, and you can see these seams in here. There's one that he's already got this one open. So this is what you're going to do. You're going to open these seams. This is the silver skin. You want to remove all that. So here's the whole hind leg, and you can see all these seams in here. There's one there, there's one, and that's the different muscle groups or the different cuts of meat. You got the rump roast, you got your sirloin tip, and there's the seam that you'll just make your cut along here. Then you can get your hand and just start pulling on it and doing a little bit of cutting around here, and you can free that. Same with the different rounds. You got the top eye and the bottom round, and they've got seams for each one of those. And so they'll come off like this. And let me tell you, the first few, they're not going to look like this, and that's fine. They still eat just fine. So you just takes, the more you do, the better you get. And how you use that shank, again, that's up to you. There is some way they cook it. I forget what that's called.
Yeah, ossobuco, but
Yeah.
that's really better with the
Yeah,
nag.
yeah. So I've never tried that, but we cut it off and then grind it for a hamburger and stuff. And then you'll have some scraps and stuff when you do all this. Those make good burger. You can do this without cutting the individual ones by cutting cross sections through that whole hind leg and then slide it off the bone without even having to cut the bone. I did this one time. The one thing I'll tell you, these individual muscle groups that I told you are very loosely attached, and this is not a nice firm piece of meat, but it can stay together, and then you can put it in your packaging and freeze it like that, and then you can cook it as a larger piece. So as you can see, there's got all the cuts that you would get from a steer. So it's got a lot of flexibility in how you do this. So you want to package your meat some way, either, and if you got freezer paper or you got your vacuum sealer down here, you definitely want to put the date, because you want to rotate your stock, use the oldest first, and then whatever you put in here, it depends. I always want to put the cut of meat and the date, and I just put venison. It doesn't matter to me whether it's archery or buck necessarily. Just make the cut of meat and the date. Freezing is probably the most common way to store it. 0 to -5 degrees. You want to keep it obviously frozen. It'll last up to a year. Sometimes it'll last even longer. So it just depends. A little bit longer on the vacuum sealing, because the worst thing is air gets in here, and that's where the freezer burn comes from. It actually dries out. So the vacuum sealer tends to keep the air out quicker, longer. If you do canning, you can actually can meat. We haven't done that yet, but got a long shelf life. You don't have to worry about the power going out and ruin your meat. Jerky is very popular. Lots of recipes out there. This is where I'm saying you want to try to cut this nice, consistent thicknesses. And this is where it's handy to kind of semi-freeze it. You don't want to freeze it solid, but that allows it to cut a lot easier. Some people use meat slicers as well. Again, make sure your dehydrator goes up to 160 degrees at least, and store this in the refrigerator. They don't recommend you store this outside, out of the refrigerator. We use a lot of ground meat. Great way to use all that scrap stuff, or any meat for that matter, any of the meat in there. We trim off as much of the fat and silver skin as you can. It can be time consuming to do that, but we find a better quality by trimming off as much as we can. We always grind some and package it without any fat in it, because our spaghetti and lasagna, chili, things like that, we don't need fat. We don't need extra fat. So we make some like that, and we label it such, no fat. And then if we're going to make meatballs or meatloaf or burgers, we go ahead and add fat. You can add beef or pork fat. 20 to 30% is common. It can be more or less depending on your taste. And we even make hamburgers and meatloaf. We actually add seasoning to it and form it and then freeze it like that. And then we can just take it out and throw it in the oven. It's all ready. So that works out pretty well. You do need some kind of a grinder, whether it's an electric grinder or a hand grinder. We did, when the kids left and weren't grinding anymore with a hand grinder, we bought an electric grinder, and we found this foot pedal. You can buy those. It attaches to the grinder, and you don't have to get your gooey hands on the grinder all the time. You just use your foot and it turns it on and off. Helps a lot. This is a mixer. We have one of these, and it helps mix the fat with the meat. And you can make sausage. It's just really a ground meat with different seasonings in it all. And the patty is real easy. Again, that's ground meat like a hamburger, but you just got different seasonings to make it taste more like a sausage. You probably generally use a little bit more fat in it, depending again on your taste. They do have packaged mixes that have a cure, like a sodium nitrite, that is a preservative if you want to use preservatives. But they do have mixes that have the flavoring all in it. Or you can ask your friends what's a good recipe for sausage. If you want to make case sausage like these, most grinders come with a stuffer that fits on the end. You just slide the casing over top of your stuffer tube, and as you turn the grinder on, it pushes it out into the into the casing, and then you tie it off periodically depending on the size you want. Cooking is just it is a extremely lean meat. There's no fat, so it will dry out. So, most people like it on the rare side to keep it tender. But you can add a lot of bacon to make it less healthy. But anything makes bacon. Bacon makes anything good, right? So, this is very common to use bacon on some of these things. Keeps it moist, as well as add flavor. You can grill, you can make, all kinds of stews and chilies and different things. Just however you use beef, pretty much you can use venison. So we got a smoker recently, and now we're addicted to smoked venison. So anyway, a lot of information there. I know there's a lot of YouTube videos out there that are very good. The Resources Commission has that whole series on how to do this. Very good videos. So highly recommend you just study this. But the way to learn is to do. If you got somebody that's a hunter, try to get with them. If they kill a deer, go out there. Don't just watch. Get your hands gooey. Get some gloves on and get in there and just do it. And then once you've done it once, you say, man, this is not that hard. And you'll want to keep doing it. All right, Judy mentioned all this, so we're not going to talk about that. And these are the communications, which you'll get all the information. So that's it. I did pretty good, Dee.
Yes, you did, Guy. And as Guy pointed out, I mean, this whole video is a great overview. That's what it's intending to be, our webinar. And as he mentioned, that full series of processing, and we'll also re-include the field dressing video, and then everything from skinning all the way to cutting it up, from one of our former officers that had a processing shop. And so you'll get them when the recordings are available, and I'll send that out as soon as the recordings are available. Like I said, it could be up to 2 weeks, but likely less. You'll get that, and then you'll also get all the information that Judy provided initially, how to extend your opportunities here to learn. And so now is usually a time when we get into the Q&A. Last night, obviously, with the hunting, we had the overview of regulations, or in other words, what is the most common deer hunting violations. And since some of these folks were here last night, I did mention, Eric, that probably one of the most common violations is not tagging. So if you just want to mention that quickly, and or any other common deer hunting violations, since we have an officer tonight.
Absolutely. Far and away, the most common violation of the law that we see is people failing to tag and register their big game kills. So our big game in North Carolina is deer, bear, and turkey. We have switched to this new Go Outdoors app. You can tag that animal on the app. I highly recommend that you download that before the season, before you get started hunting, so that you can familiarize yourself with it. And you can actually tag your big game animal on that app with or without cell phone service. So without cell phone service, it will capture the time that it will timestamp when you hit the button to tag and register that animal, and when you get to service, it will transmit. But you will be able to we'll be able to see that you tagged that animal at the site of the kill. So before moving your animal from the side of the kill, your tag needs to be punched, or on your app, you need to go ahead and tag it on the app. And then before you begin to break that deer down for consumption, meaning starting to skin that deer or dropping it off at a processor or whatever it may be, it needs to be called in, or just finish out that tagging process on the app where you actually get your harvest ID number. Tagging your animals is very, very simple. It provides a lot of data to our biologists and the guys around the state that are much smarter than me, that allow them to use that data to better understand our deer herd in North Carolina and to better manage those deer for all of us to enjoy into the future. So that information that you provide goes directly to our biologists and our scientists with this agency and provides very, very crucial, important data. So we So not only is it the law, but it is something that really, really benefits the entire deer population. So please make sure that you familiarize yourself with that process before you go into the field.
Awesome, Officer Gleason. That was great. Very good job on that overview there. Appreciate that very much. I guess we'll start hitting some of these questions now. And I saw this one first up. Great content, and then they have a share here. And thanks for saying that. We try to make this better every year. New to using public land with gun. I really appreciate the intro session tips to get elevated, not shoot from the ground. Picked up a climber last night. Tried on my safety harness, safety first. That's good to hear. So with a lot more deer now for field deer recovery and field processing, do you recommend taking all the deer back to the truck, then go back and search? And what do you do on a game land if you are field processing and have to make multiple trips? Eric, I believe you're one of those big woods hunters that kind of kills maybe from a distance, yada, yada, right? When it comes to deer or turkey?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time hunting far away from the truck, and I hunt several states every year. And the longer that you pursue hunting, you'll begin to figure out how much of that gear you really need and how much of it you don't need, and you'll be able to really lighten up how much you're carrying into the field. I would say a lot of that really just depends on how far I am from the truck. If I'm hunting closer to the truck, then I'll leave a lot of my field processing gear at the vehicle, so that way after I make a shot, then I can give that animal time to expire before I go back and search for it. It's really just a question of how much you want to carry, how far you want to carry it, and how many trips you want to make. What do you do on game land if you are field processing, and if you have to make multiple trips? I would recommend getting yourself a good pack of some kind of frame pack that has like a meat shelf on it, and buy yourself some. You can buy cheaper one-time use disposable game bags, which will help keep your meat clean, help keep flies off of it while you're processing in the field and transporting it from the field to the truck. Like I said, you can buy cheap one-time use, or you can spend more money and buy some that you can clean and continuously reuse. But you have a lot of options, but I would certainly recommend getting yourself a good pack to carry those deer in, and give yourself a few times of going out in the field, and you'll figure out how much of that gear you're toting into the woods that you think, maybe I don't need this, that, or the other, and you'll be able to cut down on some of that weight and figure out the things that are essentials versus maybe just luxuries.
Okay, and Eric, I'm going to give Guy here a chance too, but a question that does come up, and I've heard it a few times. Leaving carcasses is considered littering in a sense. So let's say somebody's way back in on a bigger tract of game lands. They decide they want to process it in the field. Is that, and maybe it depends on where and how far back, because, again, the issue of littering. Is it okay to be leaving carcass parts and deer hides, on the ground? I'm a person that drags every deer out I've ever gotten, usually on a cart or a sled, and never leaves the full deer, never cuts the meat off and leaves the rest of the deer. So what, let's take in a law sense, what's legal?
It is absolutely okay if you are way back and you're going to cut that deer up to leave the entrails, the hide, the head, so on and so forth in the woods. There's a very big difference in harvesting a deer on game land, processing that deer on game land, and leaving those things there, than shooting a deer on your private property and driving to the game land and dumping it in the parking area. And I think most of you probably can understand that difference. If you're cutting up your deer on game land, you're not going to have a problem. That being said, there's a difference in dragging the deer to the parking lot and cutting it up in the parking lot and leaving that carcass and entrails in the parking lot. And again, I think it's common sense. I think you all probably understand that difference. But if you're way back and you're going to pack your deer out and you need to leave those entrails, hide, head, hooves, things like that, that's not a problem.
Well said. Guy, do you have anything to add for that packing and getting out?
No, I do. I do have a question though for Eric. Do you have to have proof of sex on the if you do that?
So it depends on the season you're in, I guess, is the easy answer, right? So we have areas in Western North Carolina that only have particular doe days. So I would recommend, if you're going to go ahead and dismember that deer in the field, to keep some kind of verification of the sex. And remember, before you break that animal down, beyond field dressing, it does need to be tagged and registered. So when you go through that
Absolutely.
registration process, it will go ahead and say it was, you'll select whether it was an antler deer or an antlerless deer.
Hence the importance of downloading that app
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
That's
Yeah.
correct. And familiarizing yourself with it ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yes, very well said. And Guy, did you have anything to add?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay, if a deer that is shot and then upon recovery, then you notice warts oozing, can't eat the meat, what do you do with the deer on game land? I guess that's Eric. You
Yeah,
have comments on that?
So if it's something that you're concerned about with health after you shoot that deer, I would recommend taking as many pictures as possible and getting in touch with the biologist or the local game warden to see if it's something that they want to do further testing on. I want to be as clear on this as I can. If you shoot a deer while hunting and you are shooting it and then realize, don't shoot anything you're not ready to tag. Let me just say it like that. That's the long and short. It's a slippery slope to say, well, if you shoot it and you walk up to it and realize it's something that's sick, you don't have to tag it. That's certainly not the case. When you harvest a deer, it needs to be tagged and registered. So if it's something that you see and you feel like, ooh, I don't think that's a deer I want to tag, but it does look sick, I wouldn't recommend shooting it. Let somebody know with our agency that you have seen a sick deer and what those symptoms were. If you can take pictures or videos, so on and so forth, and get that to them. But if it's something that you don't want to tag, don't shoot it. The only exception to that I can really think of is if you hit a deer with your vehicle and it's on the side of the road and its legs are broken or something like that, and you're putting the deer down on the side of the road. That's pretty much the only exception.
Okay, great. Okay, for using game bags, do you slip that on over the body after field dressing and then drag out of the woods to the truck? Any tips for using game bags? Guy, you want to jump on that? I usually don't use game bags. That's usually, I guess, if you have chunks of meat that you don't want to get dirty and throw it in a backpack, right?
right. That's I mean, I don't use them either, but we did gone out west and didn't have to use them, but we did buy game bags because generally you have to quarter it out in the field because you don't drag an elk or something like that back to your truck, if you're back in the mountains. So that's where the game bags were used. Just like Eric said, you put them in your put the meat in the bags and you put them in your pack and pack it out to keep it clean and free of flies. So generally, I don't know of one that fits over the carcass. I've never seen one that's that big. These are definitely not big enough to fit over a whole deer that I know of.
They're for leg quarters.
Yeah, legs and shoulders and all the meat pieces that you take off the carcass.
Is there any concern about ticks while field dressing or skinning a deer? I would say so, guys. Would you agree? And in fact, most of them are, well, some of them are attached, but some of them may not be, correct?
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, just like walking in the woods. I mean, they got ticks, and it's not impossible they can get onto you from the deer. But especially in archery season, when it's hot as it is, ticks and lice are going to be on these deer. There's no question that most of them will have some. Even in the winter, I mean, I see, we do even the ones we get in late December, they can still have ticks. So, and they pretty well, the ones I've seen, most of them are fairly well attached. I don't see ticks. I see lice crawling around, but they will drop off. So yeah, it's something you got to think about.
And bottom line, make sure your clothing, one of the best things for clothing is that permethrin, and Sawyer is a common one. You can get it at Walmart. That is sprayed on the clothing and allowed to dry before you use it. Great for repelling ticks and chiggers and all those things. And then, yeah, it's probably good to have, especially during the warm season.
Right.
Have some stuff for your own body, like, you know, whether it be the DEET stuff or there's that other one now that doesn't damage equipment. Eric, do you remember the name of that? I'm forgetting it now. It's one of the off products that's not DEET. God, I forget the name. Anyway,
the permethrin is primarily
well,
what
for
I
the
use.
clothing,
That's
right? But there's a spray
fantastic.
too that has something that doesn't melt plastic, and I'm forgetting the name. But
But that is a great preseason thing
yes,
to do. Like
yes.
like this week, get your clothes out, including your socks,
Yep.
and spray that stuff so you've got it for the season. It lasts 10 washes.
Yes, and always check yourself too, whether in the field or when you get home. So someone says, barely hear you, Deke. And yeah, my mic wasn't down in front of my face, but it is now. It's easy to forget. I put it aside when I get up. Can you advise what to do if after the kill the animal appears not fit? Tagging, reporting. Again, I think we already covered that.
Yep.
Okay, being new to hunting and not sure what to expect, I am an older female. Would it be acceptable to use a high weight capacity wagon to bring any deer back to my vehicle if I get lucky enough to get one? Guy, feel free.
What?
Yes, but
Yeah.
you remember that you're carrying it over very rough terrain sometimes. So
Yeah.
they do make deer carts that are much more agile,
Mhm.
and very easy to use.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got
And-
one that's a dual axle made by Hawk, and that thing goes up and over logs and stuff. It's really, really handy. So, and you can use it to carry your stand in as well. So yeah, deer carts are generally, I mean, a wagon of certain sorts, as long as it isn't real tippy, because things tend to want to tip over and the whole carcass goes over and you got to pick it back up. So yeah, deer carts are very, very common.
Sleds are good too. They make
Sleds,
deer
yeah.
sleds, and they can move sometimes even better and also much lighter. Anything to add to that, Eric?
No, I think y'all nailed it. The sleds and the carts are really the best option if you don't want to break that animal down in the field.
After field processing, the cavity is open. Won't that get dirty when dragging to the truck? Solo hunter on game land. Guys,
yeah, there will be some dirt in there. I mean, unless you can seal that back up somehow, but it rinses out and we've never worried about it.
Try to avoid dragging it through water.
Yeah.
yeah, and I will say, for the most part, once you open up that body cavity and that deer's laying on its side, even when you're dragging it, that hole gets much smaller. And in
It
fact,
does.
even the skin and the membrane there at the opening, it partially closes. I've never had an issue with stuff getting in there. But Judy did point out, don't drag it through the water, because whenever you do any type of rinsing, you introduce the growth of bacteria. So if anything, keep it dry, get all that blood out like you saw in that field dressing vid. And yeah, just let it air out. Don't, if you have paper towels, you can wipe it out, but you don't have to, but don't get water in there. Will the ticks affect the meat at all? No, I know of no deer that transmitted Lyme disease to somebody else. You just want to make sure you get them off before you're processing it. But again, for the most part, they're going to stay with the skin. Agreed, Eric?
Agreed, but I'm no biologist, but I've never heard of tick-borne diseases affecting the meat and then transmitting to humans.
Right. Now you do, though, now that we have, the Lone Star tick that gives you that allergy to meat and the Lyme disease and everything else. Believe me, back in the day, I was very laxed. I didn't use spray a lot of times. I've pulled ticks out of my arm with a knife. They were that deep. but now I do those things because yeah, you don't want to deal with any of that stuff. And it's a real thing. Again, it's CWD, it's COVID, it's things you got to live with. Those things are hosts and they will, they'll get on you. But if you use the chemicals, the permethrin on the clothing and you spray yourself down with the other products, you'll be good to go. Picardin, that's it. Thank you. Picardin. That's the one. If you don't want to damage your equipment, long story short, somebody I was dove hunting with one year was spraying some of the DEET product and got on the gun and it put spots all over the gun, where Picardin is different. It doesn't damage equipment and it seems to work too. Thank you for that. Is it more common to field dress deer at the kill site or to quarter or bone out a deer at the kill site? Guy?
More common just to field dress. I mean, I do that every deer right at the site of the kill. I've yet to bone one out because it's never been necessary. I mean, Eric sounds like Eric hunts far enough back where he probably has had to do it, but I've just never had to do it.
But you have to remember that when you move a deer, you move the disease. So, as we become more alert and aware to some of the things that we don't want to move from one area to another, you have to use good judgment there. If you can find a place on the property that you harvested that deer and can safely and clean and quarter a deer while you're still in the field, you should do it. Especially the field dressing, because I think a lot of the disease, will follow those entrails. But to the extent that you can not move that deer any farther than you have to, that's just good practice.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add to that, Eric?
No, I would agree with everything she just said. The only thing that I've ever gone so far as to bone out in the field are elk, just for sheer size. But if it's something that you don't feel like you want to go that far as to bone that deer out in the field, breaking them down into quarters really saves a lot of weight, and you can get by with deer just in quarters.
Yeah. Just a little hint of back in the day, which I do think smarter now, as I just mentioned. I remember killing a deer. I was probably 1.5 miles back on a big game lands and over rocky terrain. And I killed that deer at 10:30. I got it out at 5 p.m. and all the hair was worn off to one side. So basically that side was tenderized too. So someone said Picardian. So I guess they're trying to get the name right. Hey, just go in the Walmart, look at all the deep woods off and look at the one that has blue on it. And I believe it is Picardin, and you'll see the type that doesn't damage equipment. And so that's the one that is. And you can see it there or in a sporting goods store, your favorite sporting goods store. So the new app was mentioned. Do you still need a paper copy of your license and tags, or does the app work? Plus, do you need a paper copy of the landowner permission, or does the electronic document on the phone work? There you go, Eric. That's one for you.
Sure. So license and tags just on the app is just fine. You can do everything that you need from a license and tag standpoint on the app. As far as a copy of your landowner permission, the law specifies that it has to be a signed written permission within the last year. So if you take a picture of that, that would probably suffice, but it does need to show the entire document and the landowner's signature, and some contact information for that landowner. So I would probably recommend just going ahead and carrying the paper copy of the landowner permission, but you can certainly just take a picture of that as long as it is a signed copy.
Okay, and Eric, since I'm going to play devil's advocate here, because as an example, I'm all old school and definitely vintage in so many ways. So I'll continue to use the paper tags. I'm not against apps, but that's the easiest way to do it. So let's say when I harvest my deer, I will punch my tag, the month and the day for that particular tag. And then obviously I'll report it. I'll call it in probably or on the phone. If I use my tag, do I need to stay consistent with the tag, or could I use a paper tag for one and then the app for the other? Is it okay to mix and match or not?
So this app is new to all of us. So I'm going to tell you my best guess, but that's a great question that I'm not 100% sure of the answer to. My best guess is that when you use your paper tag and you call that in, once it goes through our system, it will probably update in the app and show that tag is used within the app. But that's a really good question, Dee, that I'm truthfully not 100% on, and I'm just telling you my best guess there.
Okay. No, and that's not a problem. And really, when it comes to folks in the field, you're going to have different officers. And yeah, if there's gray areas there, obviously it could come up. But the point is, yeah, I guess as long as you can show proof of
Yeah,
that
that's right.
deer, that's probably the best way, because it's just like they say, yeah, the app will work when there's no internet. And so that's pretty much telling you, so don't come out of the woods and say my battery's dead, because I know you guys encounter all kind of things, but you better be able to show proof you're tagging the deer, right?
Yeah, that's right. And look, the app's new to everybody. It's new to all of us with this agency. It's new to the general public. There's going to be a learning curve. There's going to be issues. There's going to be bugs. Make your best effort. If something goes wrong with it, document that you're making your best effort. Do everything that you can to do things the way they're supposed to be done, and we'll work with you if there's some failure with that app.
Okay, great. We're out of questions here, so we're probably going to give about 30 seconds or so if there's any more. But other than that, you folks have a great night. Thanks for joining us tonight. Again, as soon as I get the recording, I will be sending it out along with the slides I mentioned, all the processing vids, among a few other things that we have. And do know that there are still remaining webinars and Getting Started Outdoors workshop if anybody's interested. And I'll probably put them in the email too. That will make it easier. But if anybody's interested in advance, shoot me an email. And I don't want to get a ton of emails. I'm actually going to be away this weekend at a squirrel hunting workshop in Gastonia, but I'll try to get back to you as quickly as I can. There appears to be one more question. Thank you. Great job. We appreciate that. I live near South Carolina. Can I take my deer over the border to process?
As long as that deer, if it leaves this state, or if I'm not 100% sure if you're asking if you can bring deer from South Carolina or North Carolina to South Carolina, but really the answer is the same. It has to be deboned meat. You can't bring any bones, bone fragments, skull, spinal column, spinal cord. You would need to completely debone that meat and bring it to your processor wherever they be. But after this webinar, you don't need to take it to a processor, right? You got that figured out now. So.
Yeah, and I'm going to assume, Eric, that fine is probably stiff, is it not?
I don't know the number right off the top of my head, but yes, yeah. I mean, look, there's not a deer, bird, bear, squirrel. There's not a critter running around the state of North Carolina that's worth getting in trouble over. So just follow the law and be a good steward of the land and conservationist.
Right. And folks, keep in mind, we're trying to protect the deer herd. We're trying to protect and continue to be able to harvest and enjoy charismatic megafauna, the white-tailed deer. And so being wise stewards of that resource and obeying the law, to try to control it is what we have to do. How many tags are included with the hunting license for deer, Eric?
6, 2 buck tags, 4 doe tags.
And I will tell you that is the best buy you will ever get. In fact, in my home state, and if anybody's from Pennsylvania, you get 1 buck tag on your license, and then you've got to a la carte buy extra doe tags. So this is probably one of the best deals for hunting when it comes to that. So,
and no daily limit. If you so choose to shoot 2 bucks and 4 does in one day, that's a lot of processing ahead of you, but you can do that. So.
All I can say is bless your heart. It's going to be a long night.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of like a trip out west. It's going to be multiple days, maybe. Okay, and they said from NC to South Carolina, field dress. So yeah, obviously it can't be just field dressed.
Does the no bone over the border include trophies? So that means that if you're going to bring back antlers or a deer that you want to have mounted from another state, it needs to be a completely clean skull cap. So you could bring back the cape, you know, just the hide that the taxidermist is going to use, and then you would skull cap that deer, and you need to clean that skull cap, get any brain matter, any residue off of it, a clean skull cap and the cape.
Yeah, more or
Now
less,
that-
it should be like a Euro mount, right?
Correct. And that does not include finished taxidermy, right? So if you shoot a deer in South Carolina, you bring it to a taxidermist in South Carolina, you can bring your finished taxidermy products over the border with no problem.
Yep, and that obviously takes care of this one. Does the no bone over the border include trophies? Well, trophies as long as it's been processed, right?
But yeah, that's right. Like I said, like I was saying, so the trophy has to be the clean skull plate.
Exactly. Okay. Okay, any closing comments from Guy?
Nope. Boat archery season starts Saturday. So if y'all are going out, good luck and have a great season. Thank you for listening.
And any closing comments from you, Eric?
Nope. Thanks for having me. Hope you guys learned something. And if you have questions, pick up the phone and call one of us. Our numbers are all available on the website, and we're here to help you and to serve the public. So if you have questions, call before you go and just guess.
Okay, and some more accolades. We appreciate that very much. Thank you, folks. Be safe, be ethical. Good luck this fall. Again, if you can watch some more videos, or rather the webinar series, or even if you qualify for the GSO workshops, we look forward to seeing you. Stay safe, and I thank again my panelists for being here tonight. We can't do what we do without obviously our partners and our staff that assist this way. So you folks have a great night. Take care, be safe, and good luck. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.